Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. Joining us now is four-star Air Force General Michael Hayden. He is the former director of the National Security Agency and director of the Central Intelligence Agency. General Hayden is also a member of the advisory board at lignet.com. General Hayden, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you very much for the opportunity.
There is now reports that the U.S. ambassador to Libya was killed in an attack on Wednesday. Where does the State Department and the Obama administration go from here after this attack on the U.S. Embassy by radical Islamists in Libya?
Well, you know what? I'm reminded of Secretary of State Powell's comment about Iraq going back almost a decade ago. You know, the pottery barn theory, if you break it, you own it. And here's a case where we went into Libya for reasons that seemed very powerful to some people at the time, almost all of them humanitarian, but perhaps without a true or deep appreciation for what the secondary and tertiary effects of overthrowing Gaddafi would be. I mean, look, this was always the story we saw in those cell phone videos of oppressed and oppressor, but there were other stories going on too. There were other narratives, East versus West in Libya, tribal disputes in Libya, Eastern Libya being the home of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group. I mean, all these subplots were always out there, and once you shattered the old society, these subplots become far more powerful, and now we're seeing the results of that. Loss of control of man-portable surface-to-air missiles, weapons from Libya being used to grab the northern half of Mali away from the Malian government, who was a good friend of the United States. You've got the Russians dealing with some legitimacy that UN Security Council resolution on Libya was bait and switch. It was never just humanitarian assistance. It was to overthrow the regime, and now that affects how the Russians think about Syria. I've already mentioned the impact it had on Iran, and now you've got a heavily armed state in Libya is armed at the militia and tribal level, and now we've got it. I actually said when we first intervened that we now take on a moral responsibility for the future of the Libyan state, and here we are.
Well, I'm reading a statement here just released by President Obama. He says, quote, "I strongly condemn the outrageous attack on our diplomatic facility in Benghazi, which took the lives of Americans." He goes on to say, "I have directed my administration to provide all necessary resources to support the security of our personnel in Libya and to increase security at our diplomatic posts around the globe." Do you think in other tenuous areas, specifically in Middle Eastern countries, that our State Department officials are in greater danger now?
Oh, I'm certain the cables have gone out to the appropriate embassies in that region saying, be on your guard, increase security, strengthen your liaison with the local government in order to get warning of impending demonstrations or attacks. You might even see people being told to vary their times and routes going to work, other people being told to stay at home, telecommute for a couple of days rather than coming into the embassy. I mean, you've got to take all appropriate precautions. Although I must admit, if you were going to predict two countries in which these events would take place, I'd have picked Egypt and Libya as being the two that were most volatile and the two in which these kinds of events would have been most likely.
Now, this is still, of course, a developing situation here, but it appears like the Libyan military forces or the Libyan police forces were slow to act once this protest developed. Do you think that was deliberate? I really don't know. And, one wise man once told me, several decades ago, never blame on malice what can equally be explained by incompetence, at least as a going-in position. So we're just going to have to see how the facts take us with regard to what the Libyan government did or didn't do. And this is all apparently over a YouTube movie that was made here in the United States and promoted by a pastor who was controversial to say the least. Does that pastor, you think, have blood on his hands for promoting this movie?
Well, blood on his hands is a strong statement. Actions have consequences, These are reasonably predictable consequences. So I do think that someone who kind of set this chain of events in motion bears some measure of responsibility. But when you come right down to it, one of our fundamental values is freedom of speech. And we have a right to say that, or people have a right to say things even if those things are offensive. Frankly, that's the real test of freedom of speech, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we don't want to discount the appalling acts of what happened in Libya, but we're still searching for answers at this point. And one more question for you: why were the protests in Libya so violent, turning into these attacks, these apparently with rocket-propelled grenades, when similar protests in Egypt were more or less peaceful?
Yeah, the real answer is I don't know. If I were in government, I'd want to see local tactical reporting. But on the surface, Libya is a far more fractured society. Libya is now controlled by a variety of competing armed groups. It could be simply a case where arms in the hands of violent, ill-tempered men are just more numerous in Libya than they are in Egypt.
All right, General Michael Hayden, thank you so much for your time today, sir. A lot going on, and a lot going on that really you and a few other people around can give the kind of insight that you have on these situations. It was great talking to you today, sir.
Okay, well, thank you very much.